obviously skipping a few books here. I did a video on the very first Hunger Games book, and now we're skipping straight to the prequel. I feel like the why is pretty obvious. The movie for the prequel came out, so I thought, hey, why not? We'll do that one next, and then we'll go back and do the other ones after. So don't worry, I will do Catching Fire and Mockingjay, but they'll just come out after this one. I've also been giving, I think, a little bit too much plot summary. We'll mostly be talking about the analysis today. My big question here is it a cash grab? Now, I want to be very, very clear. I have no issue with authors of popular series writing more than they originally planned. If the readers want it and the writer wants to do it, great. And if they're motivated by money, who cares? Artists deserve to be paid for their art, okay? The only time it makes me angry is when I feel like they didn't add anything or say anything new. So that's where I'm coming from in judging this. Did she add to the series? Did she say something new? We shall see. So there are going to be spoilers. However, I will have a spoiler-free analysis section marked in the chapters. So if you don't want spoilers and you just kind of want to know if it's worth your time to read or go see the movie, then you can skip to that section. But first, I will say I went to see the movie with my friend Marissa. Her and her husband have a channel called The Review Crew. And Marissa and I made a review of the movie on their channel. So definitely go check that out if you want to know about the movie specifically. But one of the things that she said was that she got really confused in the beginning because they blasted through the exposition. And I will say, there were even points where I was like, wait, what name was that? Oh, okay, that's that person. And the only reason I really understood is because I had read the book. So if you want to see the movie and you're worried you might be confused by the exposition, then you might want to stick through my little exposition part just to make it more clear. I'll try to keep it all to stuff that was revealed in the first 2-3 chapters, so it won't be any huge spoilers. But if you don't even want that, you can just skip to the spoiler-free section and it won't have any of that. All right, I think that's quite enough preamble. Let's... Oh, what was that? Dive in. Very good. You guys are learning. Light spoilers in the exposition section, just a warning. This book takes place 64 years before the original trilogy. We are following Coriolanus Snow. He's President Snow, by the way, in the later trilogy. Now, Coriolanus is quite an extreme name. It's very long. It's got a lot of syllables. So I'm going to call him Cory from here on out. They do call him Corio as a nickname, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue. So I'm going to go with Cory. I hope that's all right. He's 18, which makes him 82 at the time of the original trilogy. 82 years old. Now listen, I'm not trying to be ageist or anything, but here in America we actually do unfortunately have politicians who are around that age. And it is, we'll just say, not going well for them. So I don't know if they have some kind of anti-senile medication in the Capitol. I remember him being pretty lucid at the time of the original trilogy. I feel like Suzanne Collins probably backed herself into a little bit of a corner here because she wanted it to be the 10th Hunger Games, but she already established that the later Hunger Games is the 74th or whatever. And if she wants Cory to be an adult at the time of this book, the youngest she can make him is 18. So we can forgive. But yeah, canonically he's 82. For the later books, so that's interesting. Both of his parents are dead, and he's a senior at the Academy, which is a prestigious high school in the capital. Most of the students he's there with are also from the capital and very wealthy, with an exception of a Mr. Sejanus Plinth, who was originally from District 2. His dad owns a weapons company, and they sold a bunch of weapons to the capital during the war, and then moved to the capital after the war. Sejanus is not really accepted by any of his classmates. This includes Cory, but Cory keeps up the appearance that he's at least okay with Sejanus. It's mostly political though. Cory's very political and he's like, why make an enemy if you don't need one, you know? I just wanted to quickly clarify that Sejanus is in fact very wealthy, and that's important to the story. I kind of made it sound like he wasn't. He's not from the capital, but his family has a ton of money, and that's super important. So he's always been nice to Sejanus, but it's not because he respects him. Don't get it twisted. Cory hates the people from the districts. All of the seniors at the Academy are going to mentor tributes in the 10th Hunger Games. Viewership is down. Folks, nobody's watching the Hunger Games. And the game makers are trying to figure out how to make it more entertaining. Part of how they're doing that is to have these students come in and pitch ideas, as well as to try to get the tributes to open up to the Capitol before they go into the games. It's the 10th Hunger Games, so the war ended about 10 years ago. Most of the students still remember the war. All of the mentors still remember the war, and most of the tributes do. Some of them were a little too young when the war ended. And the Capitol was held under siege during the war for about 2 years. So that's part of why so many of the capital's citizens have this hatred of the districts. There was a lot of starvation, there was a lot of deprivation in the capital during the war, and they blame the districts for that. Corey has an extra stake in the Hunger Games. He doesn't have a lot of money. His family used to be very wealthy, but they invested in District 13 munitions. And when District 13 was destroyed during the war, which, as we know, if we've read the later trilogy, isn't exactly true. But from Corey's perspective, especially at this point, District 13 does not exist, got destroyed during the war, and so did all of their investments, and so now they don't have any money. But they're trying to keep up appearances, trying to keep up the illusion that they still have plenty of money, even though it's not really true. But he needs a prize upon graduation to be able to afford the university tuition. They give out cash prizes at graduation for the best in class, and the Hunger Games is an assignment. So to him, at least at the beginning of the book, that's his motivation to do well. But just to be clear, the Capitol has made it very clear to these students, they do not care if their tribute actually survives the Hunger Games. They care if people watch the Hunger Games. So Corey does not need his tribute to win, he just needs his tribute to be entertaining. We have Lucy Gray. She is the tribute from District 12 that is assigned to Corey. She's spunky. She's rambunctious. She's not to be held down by the man, you know? She's a member of the Covey, which used to be this traveling musician group that was eventually forced by the Capitol to settle down in District 12. And she's our other main character, really. Then we have Tigress. She's Corey's cousin. And if you ask me, they are way too close. But that's neither here nor over there. We've got Dean Highbottom, who's the dean of the academy. He also is addicted to morphling, which is a drug in the Capitol, and he hates Corey's guts. Volumnia Gall, played by the lovely Viola Davis, who gave a stunning performance as always. She's the head game maker, so she's kind of in charge of everything to do with the Hunger Games. Spoiler-free analysis. Was it a cash grab? Is it worth your time? Short answer, it depends. Long answer, if you liked the original trilogy, I think you would really like this, especially if you reread the trilogy before you read this. I only reread the first book before I read this, and I was able to draw so many parallels. That was super fun, and we'll talk in the spoiler section about what parallels I did draw, but it's cool. If you didn't feel strongly about the original trilogy, I still think you'd like it if you're okay with longer books. This book is really long, and at points it does kind of drag. And like I said, for me at least, there were points where I didn't really have the motivation to keep reading outside of the fact that I was making a video about it. So just keep that in mind. If you're someone that struggles to read long books, it's 500 pages. About double the size of a normal book. Normal books usually sit between 300 and 400 pages, so it's anywhere between 150 and 200 pages longer than an average novel. But do I think it was a cash grab? No, I actually think it does add a lot to the series. I think it gives a lot of context to a lot of the stuff that happens during the Hunger Games, which is really cool. Again, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn and a lot of things in there for the fans, which is really exciting. And I do feel like it had its own unique message, somewhat separate from the original trilogy. So it checks all my boxes, wasn't a cash grab. Because I'm the ultimate decider of that, obviously. And with that, we're diving back into spoilers. So if you don't like spoilers, no worries. I'll see you in the next one. So first I wanted to talk about connections to the original trilogy that I thought were really fun. The first is we find out here that the Reaping Day is on July 4th. If you're not American, you might not be aware that July 4th is the American Independence Day. Pan Am is a post-apocalyptic America. So it's cool that they put the Reaping Day on the old American Independence Day. I'd love to know more about how many years it's been since it was America and what happened to turn America into Pan Am. Why did they pick the American Independence Day for the Reaping? Definitely feels intentional. But would people have known or remembered that that used to be Independence Day? Who knows? I wanted to clarify quick that the war between the Capitol and the districts did not create Pan Am, because that might be kind of confusing. From what I could tell, and this is just my interpretation, I do not think it was America and then the war happened and then it became Pan Am. I think it was still Pan Am with the districts and stuff before the war. I don't think that created Pan Am, but I could be wrong about that. So maybe that is the origin and it was America before the war, but I don't think so. I think the Capitol already existed based off of how the characters talk about the war. I don't know. I thought it was cool. It was a neat little touch. The Hanging Tree song. We're going to talk about this for a minute. There's so much to do with the Hanging Tree song in this book that's really, really cool. If you don't know, the Hanging Tree song comes up in Mockingjay. Both the Mockingjays and the Hanging Tree song end up becoming kind of these symbols of the rebellion. So seeing the origin of it, period, is really cool. But also for the writer of it to be this girl that President Snow knew. Not just knew, but loved. And she wrote it in theory about the original hanging, but in talking to Marissa about the movie afterwards, we realized something kind of really cool, because she thought that the hanging tree was about the second hanging of Sejanus, the rebel, and the girl that they caught at the first hanging. So she thought it was more of a direct dig at Corey, him being somewhat responsible for all of those deaths, because if he had not intervened, that girl might have been freed. He obviously turned in Sejanus, and the third guy was caught in connection to these murders that Corey started. So it's cool because it was written about that original hanging in the book, that is canon, but it kind of applies to the second hanging too, and it also somewhat applies to Corey himself. Again, he feels like he murdered 3 people. And if you really want to twist it, I don't know if this is intentional or not, at the end when he's calling out to Lucy trying to find her, he says, "I killed the old me," right? The old him was the him that loved Lucy. I'm stretching here, but bear with me. And as he's calling out to her, it would be pretty obvious in his voice that he has ill intentions for her. It's also played this way in the movie. The dead man called out for his love to flee. You see what I'm saying? Like he's inadvertently telling her to run from him by calling out to her like, Lucy Gray, where are you? Why are you hiding from me? Dead man called out for his love to flee. They say he murdered 3. It kind of applies, right? And so it's really cool because there's like these 3 different places in this book where the Hanging Tree song kind of applies. The other thing that's cool is that Corey really hates the Mockingjays. They make him super uncomfortable, and even he doesn't really understand why. And I do kind of like that because it's like he's getting this premonition, if you will, that this will eventually be the symbol of the rebellion that takes him down and tears down everything he stands for. All the times that the Hanging Tree song is sung in Mockingjay, if President Snow hears it, like, he knows where that song came from, and he knows the girl that wrote it, and he knows the context of it. Isn't that cool? I liked that a lot. I think that's one of the coolest little Easter eggs in this book, and it was super fun. You also get a lot of origins to many pieces of the Hunger Games. You see where the bedding comes from, the sending in like food and water, the mentors, all that. Why they probably treat the tributes really well, because it keeps them docile. And Katniss herself. Suzanne Collins has hinted at wanting to write more books. I think if she does, we're going to end up finding out that a member of the Covey is one of Katniss's ancestors. And if I had to bet, it's going to end up being Maud Ivory. Maud Ivory is the youngest member of the Covey. And at one point, she digs up Katniss to show it to Lucy while they're all at the lake hanging out. And it felt like an Easter egg. I don't know. I feel like we're going to end up finding out that she's Katniss's grandma. And that also makes sense because if you remember, Katniss's dad had a really nice voice, and so does Katniss. That's part of where this singing the Hanging Tree song comes from. So it would make sense that they're the descendants of the Covey for that reason as well. So that's my fan theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's just what I think. All right, we've got to put our thinking caps on now. We're going to get a little serious. We're going to get a little analytical. Suzanne Collins herself has said that Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, who are all 3 philosophers, if you will. Philosophers is maybe a strong word. There are these 3 different men whose worldviews she was fascinated by. Hobbes is the author of a book called The Leviathan. He is a firm believer that human beings are inherently animalistic and that they need a strong hand of government in order to have an orderly society, or else it's just going to be the purge all the time. I forgot to say that this mindset was instilled in Corey and Gaul throughout the book. So this mindset that we need a strong hand of government in order to have an orderly society is shown through Corey and Gaul. Then there's John Locke. He was one of the people whose writings the Declaration of Independence was based off of. All men are created equal. Even though at the time it would have been white men specifically who were created equal and everybody else wasn't. But still, theoretically has all these writings saying all men are created equal. And so that mindset is instilled in Lucy and Sejanus. And then Rousseau is the one who wrote The Social Contract. I think I'm saying his name right. Sorry if I'm not. His theory was that the reason that we all get along in society is not because of government or anything like that, but because we're inherently social beings and we want to get along with others. And so we will behave within the bounds of what's expected of us in order to not get ousted by society. And this is shown through the Covey. Now, this is all per Suzanne Collins' own sharing. She said, these are kind of the thoughts that I based all of these characters' mindsets off of. However, I feel like the social contract part specifically comes up a lot in Corey and Lucy's actions. Corey pretty much hates everybody at the Capitol, but he gets along with them and keeps up appearances that he's rich even though he's not, all to stay within society. Lucy goes along with the games. Why would she? They're putting her to death. But she's being offered the opportunity to get sent stuff, donations from people. So she plays along in order to keep the people happy so that they'll donate to her and care about her. So I feel like a lot of their behavior is based around that, just to like keep them fitting into society, even if they don't necessarily have to. So it's cool to see her kind of work that in. The other places that this mindset comes up is in the 3 C's, which they mention a lot throughout the book, and that's chaos, control, and the social contract. The social contract we've touched on, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the chaos and control portion now. Chaos and control are 2 sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other, and you will never live a life without either. There must be some level of control, and there must be some level of chaos. This is made very obvious by this book. The Capitol tries really hard to control the actions of the citizens, the tributes, the mentors, everybody. But they can't. There's this element of chaos. If the Capitol had their way, none of the mentors would have died. But they didn't. And over the course of this book, if you count Sejanus, 5 of the mentors die. The rebels are able to get their message in through the bombing. And the Hunger Games still aren't that entertaining by the end. And they need to start from scratch to get people to watch them again. And what the message that ends up coming across is that the more that the Capitol tries to control the people, the more chaos they create. It feels very much like No Country for Old Men. I won't spoil that book or movie, but I do highly recommend it, especially if you're interested in this topic, this idea of chaos and control. But I wonder if she was inspired by that book as well, because No Country for Old Men, the theme really is that there's always an element of chaos. And in this book, there's always an element of chaos as well, no matter how hard the Capitol tries to make that not true. And interestingly enough, the message that Corey gets at the end of the book is not that the Capitol is incapable of control. He actually believes the Capitol perfectly capable of controlling everything, and he decides that he must join the Capitol in order to also have that control. He ends up with the worldview that somebody must be controlling things, and so if somebody has to, it's going to be him. But as we know, he's not really able to control things. And even in the later books, there's still many rebellions. He's still been stamping down chaos this entire time. And he is eventually taken down. The more Corey tries to control his own life, the more chaos that happens. He tries to control Sejanus and ends up getting him killed. And he somewhat tries to control Lucy and ends up losing her too. He tries to control everything and he fails the whole time. And yet he steps into this role where now he has more control. Supposedly, allegedly. It was cool. I thought it was well done. I mean, Suzanne Collins is obviously a really good author, so it tracks that she was able to get her message across. The final compliment, if you will, or analysis compliment I'll give it, also the title, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, on the surface, it just seems like Corey is the snake and Lucy is the songbird. Part of what Suzanne Collins said she's trying to explore here is the idea that everybody's a blank slate when they're born. And it's your situation and experiences that defines how you behave. And so I think it's more that there's a songbird and a snake within all of us. Corey, although he's seemingly the snake the whole time, definitely have moments where he behaves more like a songbird or a good person. And on the flip side of it, Lucy seems like she's this good person at heart, but she kills people throughout the narrative. And at the end, she's willing to turn on Corey. She has her snake moments too. And so it kind of further emphasizes that yin and yang, chaos versus control, snakes versus songbirds. And that life and our experiences defines how we act within all of that. But it can't all be sunshine and daisies. Were there things I didn't like about it? Absolutely. For starters, it was way too long. Seeing the movie definitely emphasized this. They consolidated things super well in the movie. They definitely brushed over some parts a little bit too fast, but they were able to consolidate scenes together so well by just taking a bunch of scenes that happened in the book in the same place and condensing them down into like 1 or 2 scenes that happens in that location. And so once I saw the movie, I was like, oh, we got like a lot of stupid detail that we did not need. It could have been way shorter. I did feel while reading it that it dragged at points, and the movie just kind of hammered that home. Like, yeah, it did not need to be that long. So there are definitely points you might have to like motivate yourself to read a little bit. The other thing that really bothered me, one of the things I really complimented about the original book was how not on the nose the messaging seemed. Even though it was really clear what you were supposed to take away from it, she was not beating you over the head with that message. And in this book, she very much was beating you over the head with the message. There's outbursts like Sejanus yells at Gaul, "You have no right to do this. Everyone has a base level of rights." It's like, Suzanne Collins getting her opinion through Sejanus. And the part that really gets to me above all else, but Lucy Gray is named after a song, All of the Covey are. And in Lucy Gray's song, the girl Lucy Gray kind of disappears at the end and you don't know what happened to her and it's left ambiguous. And then of course at the end of our actual book, Lucy Gray disappears and it's kind of ambiguous and you don't know what happened to her. And in Corey's internal monologue, he thinks to himself, wow, how interesting. that her story ended the same way the girl in the songs did. I got that, Suzanne. I did not need you to tell me that, okay? I did pick up on that one. Those are just examples, but there's so many points in the book. Like, she's spoon feeding you the message. It's like the pot of soup that you got for kissing another tribute. She's got a spoon in there and she's just... That was a reference to my first video. You would get it if you were a subscriber. So anyway, it's a little long and it's a little too on the nose at times, but there was enough positives that I still gave it a 4 personally. This is a slightly higher rating than I maybe should have gotten it per my own rating system. Technically a 3 is what I give books that I liked, but I understood why other people didn't. But it felt disingenuous to give this a 3 because I enjoyed it so much that I bumped it up to a 4. There were points where I wasn't enjoying it, but overall my experience was really good. And obviously Suzanne Collins, she doesn't need accolades from me. She's an incredible author, and we could all only dream to be as successful as she is. And there's a reason for that, and that reason is really obvious in this book. It's mostly very well executed. And I think she maybe just suffers from being a famous author now and probably being able to get away with more. Like, if she was a lesser known author, they probably would have made her pare this book down a lot to put it out. But they didn't make her do that because she's Suzanne Collins. I don't know why she would be watching this, but if she is, I would just say, Suzanne, you're capable of such great things. Obviously, again, you don't need me to tell you that. I do feel like this book would have benefited from an editor. She probably worked with one, but an editor that maybe had more sway or who was willing to tell her to cut out more. We're not sure of the exact situation. I do feel like it could have been condensed a lot. If it had been condensed, then my only complaint would have been the over-the-top messaging, and I think it would have been a lot better. I also remember seeing around the time that this book came out that a lot of people DNF'd it. So I do think a lot of people did not finish it. I would be curious to know at how many people DNF'd it at the end of the second part, because I felt like putting it down there. And like I said, I only really finished it because of the video. And I'm glad I did, because there was a lot of really cool stuff in the third section, but a lot of people didn't get there, and that's sad. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you for sticking around if you've watched this whole thing. I appreciate you. If you came over for Marissa's video, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.